The Baltimore Ravens elect to stand pat at the 2023 NFL trade deadline. No moves for them. We talk about what that means, what they could have and maybe should have done, and a lot more coming up next year on this live instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher, Ravens Wire, here as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day, free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you might be watching this live edition of the show, or anywhere you get your audio podcasts, where this will be after the fact. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast here Monday through Friday, and we also do these live shows after big news, after the game. So for Ravens news, analysis, updates, be sure to keep it locked on Locked On Ravens as we dive into this instant reaction trade deadline episode. I wish there was more to talk about with it, but the Ravens don't make a move. They stand pat at the deadline, and I know it's disappointing. Like for me personally, and we'll get into it, I would have liked to have seen them make a move. I talked about it yesterday where it wasn't necessary for them to do it because of the start they've had in their roster. But anytime you have the opportunity, and who knows what actually was out there for Eric DeCosta, for the Ravens. We heard some rumblings about it. But even if it's giving up a late round pick, it's always nice to have that insurance. So we'll talk about what they could have done, what they should have done, looking ahead as well, and what other moves they could make, because trades are done, but maybe there are a couple of free agent signings that the Ravens could make. If you're here with us live, you can follow along in the live chat. We got Dustin in here saying, really felt like we at least need to make a depth move or two, but still have high hopes. We have also Hamish in here saying, I'd rather not make a move than reach and give up too many assets. Dustin also saying, I'm more talking like corner depth or edge, not necessarily top of the market, big money or draft capital move. So a lot of opinions. Be sure to put yours in the chat. I'll try to get to as many as I can. I try to get to all the chat. But there were a lot of rumblings about Baltimore and their interest in the running back position. And I know there were reports coming out yesterday from friends of the show, Spencer Schultz and Cole Jackson, about Derrick Henry, how there was a reported agreement in place. Titans ownership turned it down. Reports today about Josh Jacobs and the Raiders' unwillingness to move Josh Jacobs unless there was a second-round pick involved. The Ravens didn't want to move the second-round pick. That came from Spencer too. So it seemed like Baltimore was really in the running back market. And it wasn't just Spencer and Cole. We heard Andy Racine report the Ravens were interested in running back. Adam Schefter had talked a little bit about it too. But when you look at the position, and again, you have to identify what needs are there at the trade deadline in multiple different ways. One is the injury situation. The Ravens lost J.K. Dobbins early in the year to the Achilles injury. So right now your room is Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and Keaton Mitchell. To me, it's fine. Like, that's a fine room. Gus is one of the most underrated running backs in the league, had a huge game in week 8. Justice Hill, I think, has looked super explosive for the most part this season. Keaton Mitchell, we've seen the potential, and there is honestly tantalizing potential there. But it's a what if. So what if Gus Edwards goes down and misses some time? What if Justice Hill has to go down? Are you comfortable and confident if you're the Ravens in Melvin Gordon taking on a more full-time role, and Owen Wright taking on a full-time role? Those guys are on the practice squad. So it's a bit of a tricky situation because, look, for these running backs, in terms of Josh Jacobs, he would have been awesome. Like, he would have been great in Baltimore. I would have loved that. It would have been a great fit. Pass protection, the pure running ability. He can be a pass catcher as well. I think the Ravens could utilize him there too. But a second-round pick for a running back, to me, does feel a little steep. Like, I'm not saying that Jacobs would come in off that second-round pick trade and not make an impact. He would have. But it's a matter of, is it worth it for an NFL team in today's day and age, in today's market, to give up a second-round pick for a running back? The market doesn't say that whatsoever. I would have rather given up the second for Derrick Henry personally. Obviously, both the Raiders and the Titans, according to reports, true or not, those are the reports saying that ownership or the decision makers didn't want to move off of Henry or Jacobs. And I feel like there's a lot of loyalty in this, right? Like if the Titans reports are true, the Titans are being loyal to a player in their organization, which honestly more teams should do, after trading away A.J. Brown. And I'm not saying A.J. Brown had the Titans career Derrick Henry has, but it's a little weird. And then with the Raiders, there was no reason for them not to move off of their stars after what we saw last night against the Lions. Josh McDaniels has been horrible. Jimmy Garoppolo's been awful. Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Max Crosby, all those guys deserve better. So I think in a vacuum, I would have liked to see the Ravens make a move, standing pat at the deadline. And it wasn't like every team made moves. The Bills got Rasul Douglas. I really like those moves. If you've listened to me, if you're an everydayer on Locked On Ravens, you know I've been pounding the table for a while for Rasul Douglas. I would have liked the Dante Jackson. We saw Montez Sweat and Chase Young both get traded. Sweat for a second and Chase Young for, I think, a conditional third, that deal was. So moves were being made at positions of need. I feel like almost every trade that happened was at a position of need for the Ravens, and you're thinking, man, the Ravens could have really done that, or everything happened in terms of, well, the Ravens could have made that move. I think the Douglas trade was a third-round pick for Rasul Douglas and a fifth, and people ask me, who's Rasul Douglas better than on the Ravens? Brandon Stevens has been awesome, but Rasul Douglas would be in that conversation. You would have a three-corner rotation. I would have loved that for him. You give up a third, get back a fifth. I'm not sure Rasul Douglas's contract situation, to be honest. I should have looked into that before I started this. But let's say he is a pending free agent. I'm not sure if he is or not. But if he is, you give up the third. Douglas probably signs a fourth-round comp pick deal. You get a comp pick back. You're essentially trading down one round for a shot at a guy to help you win this year. And maybe it's an audition. Spencer talked about this. He's talked about it. I agree with it. I've talked about it too. These trades, much like Yannick Ngakoue in 2021, it was essentially an audition. The Ravens give up a second and a fifth. I think that deal was for Ngakoue. Ngakoue leaves the Ravens, and they get a third-round comp pick back because of the fully guaranteed contract. So it's not just a guy's in a contract or you either have to extend him or he walks for nothing. It's not he walks for nothing. So I think the overall mood of Ravens fans right now is disappointment. They wanted something to get done. And I get that. Trades are awesome. I love trade deadlines. I wish they were more active. Like the NBA trade deadline is pretty active every single year, and that's something I like, especially as a Denver Nuggets guy. But we've seen the Ravens make moves like Roquan Smith, like Ngakoue, Marcus Peters, even like Ty Montgomery back in 2018. The way they are now at 6-2, I think the mood is that, why don't you go and add somebody else? Well, we don't know all the reports and all the rumblings that were going on, who Eric DeCosta was in on. We have Ivory in the chat saying the Ravens need a corner. Ravens should have made a move on Pat Surtain. Denver didn't want to trade him, I don't think, especially after winning. They're feeling good about themselves. Maybe if it went a little differently for them in terms of they had lost the last couple of games, maybe Jerry Jeudy would have been traded, Cortland Sutton, Surtain. But on top of the Broncos needing to want to trade him, it was also with the Ravens have given up a first plus because that's what it would have taken for him. I would have done it. Personally, I love Pat Surtain. And I think the potential of Marlon Humphrey and Surtain across from each other is just unreal. It's incredible. But I just don't think the Broncos were ever really in on trading him, especially after their last two games, which came out pretty well for them. Hamish saying might not be the right player, not price. The right player, right price, excuse me. Yeah, I get that. I mean, again, if you trade a first for Chase Young, is that right player, right place? No, it's an overpay for right player, right price is getting me. It's a tongue twister. But Dustin saying even Jackson in Carolina or Fuller in Washington would have been awesome. Dante Jackson. I was pounding the table for Dante Jackson. I would have loved that. Wouldn't have cost a lot too, because now what if Brandon Stevens has to miss time? What if Marlon Humphrey has to miss time too? There are levels to it where it's not just, we're stacking talent and adding it, and the Ravens are deep at corner and have gotten contributions there, so they're set. You always have to understand that we still have half an NFL football season left, plus playoffs. Hopefully the Ravens were able to make some noise there. So there will be an injury or two that happens to the Ravens, an injury or two that happens to every team. It's not just Baltimore. So I think that they can sign guys in free agency. George saying Sue will be coming soon. That's probably what it's going to end up being, an Ndamukong Suh type signing. Maybe a player gets cut and the Ravens scoop him up, like Dalvin Cook, for example. I'm not overly upset that the Ravens didn't make a move. Is it a little disappointing? Sure. I think it would have been cool if they did. But with the way that this Ravens team has kind of maneuvered themselves. They make moves when they need to, and they don't overextend and overforce things. And honestly, with the way that they've been playing so far, if the offense can hit their stride, if it can be a little better in terms of the consistency week in and week out, and they can stay healthy. The big part is health. It would have helped to get a guy at the trade deadline, but they didn't end up doing it. It's a risk, Baltimore didn't want to part with their draft capital. I think they're on pace for one compensatory pick this year, maybe two, if I'm not mistaken. I think the Powers one got canceled out by I can't remember who it got canceled out by, but Josh Oliver's, I think, is what they were still in line for. Maybe Oliver's got canceled out. One of them did. But Baltimore wants to keep their draft capital, and it doesn't help you this year, but they do have some tough decisions coming up with Patrick Queen, Justin Madubuike, Geno Stone, Michael Pierce, Jadeveon Clowney, Kevin Zeitler. They're going to need to replace some of those guys through the draft. So maybe that also, I'm just trying to, figure out and try to contextualize why they didn't make a move. Maybe they're trying to save their capital because they know they're not going to be able to bring back everybody. And you can get cheap, either 5-year contracts with a first rounder or 4-year contracts on these guys. But we still have lots to talk about here. We'll get some more chat comments and talk more about what the Ravens should have done at the trade deadline, the deals that happened throughout the day as well. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on this live instant reaction edition episode of Locked On Ravens. First, this episode is brought to you by DoorDash, and sometimes there are stoppages and I want to go get food, right? I'm a big snack guy, so I want to go get a snack, some from the refrigerator. I open it up, there's nothing there. So when the game goes to timeout, maybe the game goes to halftime, it's time to order with DoorDash. And in the Baltimore area, maybe you're a big sushi guy. Sushi Hana is really good. Maybe underground pizza. You're a pizza person. Pizza is something I love. There are plenty of options over on DoorDash, too, in terms of whether you want the football package. So that's pizza, wings, soda, burgers. Maybe you want to do the snack package like me. You like the chips, the dips, the nachos. Maybe you love making your own nachos. DoorDash, you can get it all delivered without missing any of the game. You can get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Subject to change, terms apply, and you can even get prepared before game day. You can stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash. Then get ready to watch your team win and hopefully win big. Again, 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Subject to change, terms apply. One more time, don't forget to use code LOCK23 for 50% off up to $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more, subject to change, terms apply. We're back here. It's our second part of this live instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens trade deadline special. Kevin Allstreicher still here talking Ravens football. Again, I wish there was a move to talk about. Moves are always fun, but the Ravens end up not making a move. They will stand pat with their team. Their 6-2 football team, which again, I think has earned the benefit of the doubt a little bit in terms of their defense playing lights out. We've seen the ceiling, at least on offense, but adding someone would have added an extra little push, an extra oomph to them. We had over 100 concurrent in here, which is awesome. I appreciate all the support here as we continue to dive into the lack of moves on this Ravens trade deadline day. Marquise saying, seeing Chase go for a third hurt. So yeah, let's start off with Marquise's comment and talk about some of the other moves that happened across the league. So for Baltimore, nothing happened. There were the rumblings about Derrick Henry, rumblings about Josh Jacobs, maybe a couple others here and there. For me, at least, and we have Spencer Schultz actually, a little drop here. Spencer says, Jacobs camped at everything they could to drum up interest. Jacobs has been vocal about his frustration in Las Vegas. Not sure Vegas ever really wanted to deal him. Not sure how deep Ravens and Raiders got. There was interest, is what he said. So, again, who knows the inner workings of everything that happened, but it felt like with those Raiders stars, there was going to be some discontent. They've just played terrible football this year, and Jacobs would have been awesome in Baltimore. But as Marquis said, Chase Young goes to San Francisco for a conditional third. I would have made that trade if I were the Ravens. Montez Sweat goes to Chicago for a second. Second's a steep price, but Montez Sweat is a heck of a player. I wouldn't have been mad at that. The Rasul Douglas deal I would have loved. A third for Rasul Douglas and a fifth, I would have been all over that. There was Donovan Peoples-Jones got traded from the Lions, or from the Browns to the Lions, excuse me. So at this point, there wasn't like there was 50 million deals happening and everything was going at 100 miles a minute. It was kind of a slow deadline day, all things considered. The Jalen Johnson from the Bears stayed put. Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy stayed put. Danielle Hunter stayed put. Pat Surtain stayed put. A lot of people stayed put. Henry, Barkley, Jacobs. But I do think that the Ravens were right, assuming the reports were true, to place their interest into the running back position. Because again, what happens if Gus goes down? What happens if Justice goes down? They're in a little bit of a bind there, especially with everything that's going on right now with injuries across the league. The Ravens, outside of the first 3 weeks, have gotten relatively a good bill of health, but we'll see what ends up happening there. Chrono's saying pretty disappointed, wanted to grab Chase Young or Derrick Henry. I get it. I do. I seriously get it. It's fun to add a player to your team that is going to have an impact not only for this season, the rest of it, but an extension potentially. I think that both those guys would have probably stayed in Baltimore. No sourcing on that or anything, but I feel like the Ravens wouldn't have wanted to rent those guys. It's an audition thing. Derrick Henry would have been awesome, but according to the reports, just wasn't in the cards. The Chase Young deal I get, though. I feel like that would have been a good deal for the Ravens to make, because what happens if Clowney goes down? What happens if, I don't know, an Owe goes down again? There are some real issues with the depth on the pass rush, especially if Ajabo can't get back, if Bowser can't get back, there are options there. Adam's saying, looking like another divisional round playoff bounce. Late 20s picking a whole bunch of, we'll get them next year, recycled conversation every year. I want to address this, Adam, because you make a point that I've actually made before about complacency. And if you've been listening to me every day on the show, I'm gonna do the whole rant again, so I apologize. But I'm a big person about complacency and not getting and staying complacent with wild card exits and divisional round exits. I think this Ravens team has potential, even without trades, to go further than that. We've seen that with the defense, with the ceiling on the offense. But a guy like a Chase Young or a Derrick Henry or a Josh Jacobs or whoever would have increased that ceiling. But the reality about this team is the playoff success has not been nearly as good as their regular season success. And you don't play for the regular season, you play for the playoffs and the championship. The Ravens have fired their coordinator in back-to-back years, or let go of them, the mutual agreeing to part ways. Martindale last offseason, Roman this past offseason. You can't continue to have those. If there is a divisional round exit or worse this year, there will have to be serious conversations about this team and what comes next. Are you firing this? Are you the special teams coordinator? Is that who goes? Mike McDonald might get a head coaching job in the offseason. Do you start talking about John Harbaugh? Those are the conversations I think you have to start having if that happens. A trade deadline acquisition probably would have pushed you closer this year. But what does it mean for the future? That's the balance of what you weigh. And I think there probably was some happy medium, happy alternative out there where both the future and the present could be addressed and not take away from one or the other too heavily. But at the same time, Baltimore clearly didn't feel like there was something on the table, and it felt like they were in on a couple things, but didn't feel like there was enough on the table for them to make a move right now. Ivory saying, might as well. The Ravens don't know how to draft every player that's been drafted in the first round has been a one-hit wonder, excluding Zay Flowers. No, that's not true. What about Lamar? Lamar's not a one-hit wonder. They've been successful in the first round. I think, this might be in relation to, Pat Surtain. I see Ivory. I get it. I do. But their first-round picks to them are valuable, not just because they can draft the high player, but the fifth-year option is big under a rookie contract. I get that trading, to me, my mindset, and this was something I said after the Roquan deal. You want your second-round pick to be what Roquan Smith is. You want your second-round pick to – Roquan Smith is 10 times what you want a second-round pick to be. So I get it. Trading a draft pick, which is uncertain, for a star, like a Pat Surtain, a proven star, is actually the mindset I'm under. Like, I get that. But at least for me, I feel like with the Ravens situation right now, Lamar signs his extension. They have a couple of other guys coming up on big ones and a couple other guys already under big contracts. I feel like they value now more than ever having guys on rookie contracts, especially if you can get a high-level contributor like a Kyle Hamilton, right? He's on the second year of a 4-year, should be 5 with the fifth-year option rookie contract. Pat Surtain is going to make upwards of $100 million when his extension gets signed. Do the Ravens have enough cap space to maneuver around that? That's the key question. So I get that. Dustin saying Douglas has next year too. Like Joe Douglas, Dustin? I don't know what you mean by Douglas. Ivory saying every player in the last 4 or 5 years, excluding Lamar and Zay Flowers. Okay, so you did say Lamar. I just caught it. But Kyle Hamilton's been great. Linderbaum's been awesome. That they have had success for the most part with their first-round picks ever since, for a while now. The second round, though, I will read off the second-round picks that the Ravens have had because I can understand the argument for second-rounders. I put this out. The Ravens' second-round pick since 2010, and these are going to be some blasts from the past. 2010, Sergio Kindle, Terrence Cody. 2011, Torrey Smith. 2012, Courtney Upshaw, Kelechi Osemele. 2013, Arthur Brown. 2014, Timmy Jernigan. 2015, Max Williams. 2016, Kamala Correa. 2017, Tyus Bowser. 2020, J.K. Dobbins. 2022, David Ajabo. And in 2018, 2019, 2021, 2023, they didn't have a second round pick. So first round picks, I think they've hit more than they've missed. Second round picks, I think they've missed more than they hit. So a second for Josh Jacobs. I think that maybe pushes you in the direction of, hey, you know what? Maybe you make that deal, but we'll see. George saying, I think we're good, especially if Bowser, Pepe, Ajabo are all coming back. Those are solid depth pieces. Like it's not the best way to phrase it. It's going to make people mad, but they're trade deadline acquisitions are Tyus Bowser, Pepe Williams, and David Ajabo. And I know everybody's saying, woohoo, awesome. And people don't want to hear that. I get it. But maybe that was their mindset where they don't have to give up draft capital in a big couple years where they're going to need it to get guys on rookie deals. Is Tyus Bowser or David Ajabo better than Montez Sweat or Chase Young? No. Is Pepe Williams better than Dante Jackson or Fuller or whoever? No. But maybe that, I'm just trying to contextualize what it would be. Tanya saying Chase went for a third round pick. Are we all in or not? We need more edge rusher to help out the secondary, excuse me. So my thing with the Ravens all in, Tanya, I think you make a good point there. My thing with the Ravens being all in is this is in some ways an all in year, but it's not the only all in year the Ravens can have. With Lamar, you don't have to be all in because you're going to he's going to make sure you're contributing and you're getting guys on the right track and on the same page. If he's healthy, he's going to do that. We saw him carry a team, no disrespect, Willie Snead, Seth Roberts, right? Sammy Watkins, Des Bryant, all these receivers. I mean, look, he could probably take me. He could take me and make me into a good wide receiver. He is that talented. But in terms of them being all in, some of that is, what about Patrick Queen? What about Matabike and Stone and Pierce and Zeitler and OBJ and all those guys? I feel like they could have made a move to maximize their window this season. Their window was still open this year. It's not like it's done, but it would have maximized their window if they were to make a trade. So that's why I'm not like, this is a travesty and it's terrible they didn't make a move. It's a little disappointing, sure, but it's not the end of the world for me. Justin saying should have sent a seventh round pick to Oakland and got Peters back. Well, yeah, Las Vegas, but I hear what you're saying, Justin. Peters would have been a fine depth piece. Honestly, not. The more I think about it, the more I wouldn't have hated that deal. Like, you don't want to rely on him to play like starter snaps, but with Brandon Stevens, you wouldn't have to. It'd be a depth guy you could put in there. It would have been kind of fun. So I would have been on board with that. But we're going to take our final break here. Coming up with the final part of the show, we'll be getting into more trade deadline talk. Looking ahead now, the trade deadline is over. What comes next for this Baltimore Ravens team and more. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to get to on this episode of Locked On Ravens Live. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. Again, that's $150 if your team wins. And FanDuel's awesome. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel for a while, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options over there that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So for this Seattle game coming up, the Ravens will have to play a trade deadline acquisition in Leonard Williams. He got traded to Seattle. So in terms of rushing yards, maybe you're taking some unders there for the Ravens. I don't know. Hopefully they can get it going. You can take some overs there, but Lamar overs, maybe Odell Beckham. You want to take the first touchdown or anytime touchdown player prop. FanDuel has a lot over there. So go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We're back rounding out Locked On Ravens, our final segment. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. Thank you again so much for tuning in, subscribing, following along with my journey here. The live shows are awesome for me. I love doing them. I wish, again, we had more to talk about than the Ravens did nothing at the trade deadline, but we do have daily Ravens content 5 days a week. Is the same show, both audio form and video form. So if you're an everydayer, thank you for listening to me every day in my voice. If it's your first time in, welcome into the show. Hopefully you stick around and stay for a while. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you for your support too. Let's get back to the comments here. I do get to as many of these as I can. And I think it gives a perspective on everything and just how the fan base is feeling. Tyler Shore saying, yeah, Bowser and Ajabo are really moving the needle. I get it. I understand. Like, it's the worst thing to hear. It's, the Ravens didn't make a move, but guess what? Their trade deadline acquisitions are actually like David Ajabo and Tyus Bowser and Pepe Williams. No disrespect to those guys, obviously, right? But they're not the needle movers that the Chase Young would have been, Daniil Hunter would have been, Montez Sweat, Dante Jackson, etc. Right? I get it. And let's see, we have Dylan saying Josh Jacobs could have been a second-round pick. We got Roquan Smith. He was playing mid in Chicago. Then we scooped him up, made his first Pro Bowl and All-Bro, had a great influence on the team. Well, to be fair, Roquan was a great player before coming to Baltimore, but I understand what you're saying because with the history of second-round picks in Baltimore, it is not overly encouraging. So trading a second for Josh Jacobs, I get that, but the way that the running back market is right now across the league, just regardless of what you think about Jacobs or the Ravens or their need, a second-round pick for a running back in today's market is steep. It is a steep price. The reason the Ravens didn't want to pay it, if that's the actual report that was true, is because it is very steep. The Ravens have to make a decision on J.K. Dobbins, and obviously J.K. is not coming back this year, and the injury history is real. I'm not trying to compare the situations, but in that case, you probably extend Jacobs and let J.K. walk. Some people would be okay with that. Others wouldn't. For me, I think I'd be fine personally, but I would love J.K. back in some way, shape, or form. But for me, it's a lot of the thing of maximizing a championship window where you definitely can do it. You definitely have the ability to maximize a championship window during free agency after the trade deadline. But this is where the disgruntled stars and some of these guys that you're kind of wondering about, well, is this guy going to get moved? Is it worth it? This is where you get those Montez Sweats and the Chase Youngs, etc. Kobe's saying a second or third in next year's draft, who's going to be a developmental prospect at best. It's definitely wise to add premium talent in our Super Bowl window. Yes, I agree. I agree with you, Kobe. I do. The thing, and I'll go back to it, is again, with the Ravens needing guys on rookie contracts and cheap deals to keep this window open, that to me is probably one of the more realistic scenarios of why they weren't willing to move a second or a third. I'm not saying it was the right decision. I probably would have done it personally. But again, contextualizing why it probably happened, there just wasn't a guy they felt was a needle mover enough to give up a pick where they're going to have a guy under contract for at least 4 years, which would be good. Tanya's saying Tyler was right in his comment. Tyus and Ajabo, they've been injured. Chase went for a third. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Yeah, having those guys be your quote-unquote trade deadline acquisitions is not the most fun thing in the world. So we'll see. Justin saying Peters took 175 yards to the house. Yeah, shout out to MP Juice Man, as Justin said. It was a big night for him, even though the Raiders are awful. It was a big night for him getting that pick six on Jared Goff. Tyler's in it. Tyler, I feel for you. Tyler, he says, Tanya, it's okay. We'll get bounced in the first round, get told about how hard we'll be coming back next year. Tyler, man, I understand. If that's what it is, there are serious conversations. I'll leave it at that because I know I've talked about it before, and that's kind of my stance about it. Let's see. 9Zoo saying disappointed the Ravens didn't make a move on a running back because Hill fumbles every other game and Gus may not hold up, in my opinion. It's a real concern. If I like panic meter wise, and you can put your panic meter down below, on a scale of 1 to 10 panic meter wise, whether the Ravens, I'd say running back wise, probably a 6. I'd say 6. Maybe for some it's more, some it's less. And I know I'm trying to play catch up on the comments. I'm going to go do a speed run in a minute here. But yeah, it's a lot to kind of put on Edwards and Hill when there were quality options out there, but maybe it just wasn't in the cards for what the Ravens actually needed or wanted. All right, let's speed run some of these comments. I'm still going to do analysis on them. Tyler says Gus goes down on a contact and Hill can't hold on to the ball nor pass protect. Yeah, it's a concern for me. Alex saying it's going to be fun fixing the 49ers while Chase Young and know that you done something doing the trade deadline. I get it. Young going to a contender hurts, or Sewell Douglas going to a contender hurts. The Montez Sweat deal doesn't really do anything, but I get it. It's tough to have your team not make a move and other contenders get better. But I will say it wasn't everybody. The Bengals didn't make a move. The Chiefs didn't make a move outside of McCole Hardman. It wasn't like every team went out and made a splash. The Ravens, unfortunately, were one that didn't as well. Tyler saying, Kevin, we played an atrocious schedule. Being 6-2 means next to nothing considering what we have coming up. Let's talk about that, Tyler, because I'm with you. The schedule gets harder. Seattle coming up, 2 divisional games before the bye week, but after the bye week is really tough. They have the Rams coming out of that. Then you got to play. I have the teams. I don't have the order. It's Jaguars. It's Jaguars, 49ers, Dolphins, Steelers. Boom, did it from memory. Yeah, it's a tough end of the season. So you want to have reinforcements for that because, yes, I agree. The offenses the Ravens have played this year outside of Detroit have not been these world-breaking offenses. They're going to be tested defensively, also going to be tested offensively. They're playing another top 10 unit, both run and pass this week in Seattle. We're going to see, right? Christopher saying they also picked us a number 1 this week. I assume Christopher's talking about the media. There are a lot of high expectations on this Ravens team. If they don't at least make the AFC Championship game, that is a problem. Tanya saying the Ravens fans saying we have enough all the time is not it. Wish we had a mindset like Philly. They get players to help their quarterback out. I don't think it's even just about that, Tanya. I think it's the injury situations too, where sometimes you have enough and then in the blink of an eye it can be taken away from you. Remember 2021, right? 2021, the hype was real. Like I was excited. Everybody was excited for that season. And then what happens? Everybody gets injured. The Ravens all of a sudden don't have a lot at running back. Their whole room goes down. Corner with Marcus Peters, guys get injured all the way through. So adding insurance depth and quality, I'm not saying you have to go out there and trade for a Pat Surtain or Devontae Adams, right? But I think adding just a player, and whether that comes in free agency and they make a move there if someone gets cut, that's fine. But it might not be as good as a trade deadline piece you could have gotten overall. Let's see. Kobe saying the Ravens running back room is an injury away from being a major concern. I agree with that. Tyler saying Sweat, Chase, Douglas, Leonard Williams all dealt in the last 24 hours. Yeah, it was a slow day for, well, again, like teams made moves. I'm not saying they didn't, but the Chiefs didn't make a move outside of Hardman. The Bengals didn't make a move. The Dolphins, right? These teams, I get that the Ravens needed to get, like, not that they needed to, but they should have probably gotten better with this. I understand. But there's a lot to kind of like in terms of their roster moving forward, but that doesn't mean that they should have just, completely gone dark at the trade deadline. But we're not going to necessarily know here. Not Nasty saying, love Kevin Ostrager, keep up the good work. I appreciate you. Ninesu saying it's always saved draft picks. Meanwhile, going all in on OBJ is looking good. I wouldn't have saved them. I would have traded not a first rounder, but I would have traded a second. I would have been totally on board for that. Odell hasn't looked good this year, and frankly, they have to re-sign him or else that deal is awful because of the void year money they have to pay him over the next 4 if they don't. So hopefully he picks it up or else the Ravens are going to be in a dead cap situation because of the void years for the next 4. Kobe saying next year we'll only have Hill and Mitchell under contract. I'm okay sending a pay for premium talent. I would have been too. Again, I would have been okay sending a second for Josh Jacobs, even though it would have been an overpay to maximize your window this year when it feels like the league is wide open. I think that's another part of it to me too. The league is wide open this year personally because every team has had a couple of bad losses. Teams are getting injured. The Ravens have injuries too. But the league feels wide open to me, so I feel like they should have made some sort of a move. But again, just wasn't in the cards, unfortunately. LeBron saying folks all overhyped. Y'all should know this organization by now. To be fair to them, they've made moves in the past, but I feel like this was a key opportunity for them to make a move and up their chances at least of a Super Bowl. DeAndre saying just have to trust the Ravens to make it to the Super Bowl this year. Titans kept Henry and Giants kept Barkley from coming. Jacobs is ready to go though, but we're 6-2. We'll be fine. At the end of the day, I think they will be fine. But when it becomes not fine is if they don't make the AFC Championship game this year. With the team they have, with the opportunity they had at the trade deadline, you cannot continue to make wild card rounds and make divisional rounds just to lose there and be, all right, it's fine. We'll just do it again next year. That's wasting Lamar's prime. It's wasting everybody else's prime, and it's wasting everybody's time. To be honest, you got to figure out where your team is. And if something's not good enough, you got to make a move to have it as well. I just think that, yeah, Tyler makes a point. Lamar got the same amount of playoff wins as the round he was drafted in, Kevin. So, yeah, that's not changing this year. Hopefully it does. We'll see what the bye situation if the Ravens get the 1 seed. But they have to have a good end to the year. And I will admit I'm a little concerned about that end of season schedule because they play a lot of good teams. It's pretty much the Rams. You can argue, oh, they're not good, but they've been better than I thought. They have talent. But that last month is absolutely brutal as well. Kobe saying we put so much value on the fifth year option, but we rescinded that for Patrick Queen. Most likely the same for Owe and Bateman. I don't think the Ravens offer the 5th year to Bateman. Owe's up in the air at this point. I'd probably say no. I get it though, especially with how the 5th year option has changed. It's a lot different this year too. DeAndre saying Ravens just don't want to go over the cap space, playing it safe. I think if they were playing it safe, that's the wrong reason not to trade. Personally, I think they should have. Dustin saying Rasul Douglas has this year plus next. Okay, thank you. I know you said that a while ago, Dustin. I appreciate you saying that. Let's see. We have Ravens have $50 million in cap space and only 36 players under contract. They need to keep their picks. Fill out most of their roster with inexpensive players. Yeah, that's probably what it is too. I think for me, the Ravens need these draft picks moving forward. I'm not saying they shouldn't have parted with none of them like they did, but at this point, Baltimore probably needs to add as much as they can through the draft, but second for Jacobs, third for Young. Those are moves that I definitely would have made as well. Travion saying this is exactly why we won't win. We need a depth and it's just stupid not to go for it this year. They should have gone for something this year, but they have other years to go for it. This is a year where, again, are you going to have the ability to have Queen and Matabike and Stone and all those guys under rookie contracts after this year? No, it's not what happens at all. So at this point, the Ravens have to figure out what direction they want to go. And it feels like they took we feel like we're good enough this year, and we also know we need stuff for the future. So at that point, I don't agree with it wholeheartedly. I'm not necessarily distraught about it, but I feel like they should have done something. Tanya saying Lamar shouldn't have to carry a team. Yep, I agree with that. Rico saying Ravens never make all-in moves. They're okay with just making the playoffs. I mean, I think that if they don't do enough this year, they should. They have to make some sort of an all-in move to make this team better as well. Judge saying if you watch the tape, Owe's been playing way better than he's ever played before. He has been playing well, but I don't think that Owe playing well should have taken the Ravens away from adding another edge if they needed it because of a couple of, also the injury situation I've been talking about as well. So there's a lot to like about this roster, but just because there's a lot to like about it doesn't mean that they made the right decision by not making a move. I get it that there are reasons for it, but I do think at the end of the day, they should have made the move. And John makes a point. Why Ravens are playing for next year? You have the team to win now. Don't trust those wide receivers. Wide receivers was a little, I feel like they trust them enough, which again, I just don't know where, like if Davante Adams became available, 100% I'm making that move. 1000% I'm making that move, but I just feel like it was never realistic with that as well. John saying we haven't had a single receiver over 100 yards this season. Zay is your best and a rookie who is really raw. Beckham's a total waste of money. Rashad's lost all his confidence. I don't think Beckham's a total waste. Has he lived up to the contract? No, not at all. I understand that. Rashad, I thought, showed something, but if that's what you're trusting to not add a Davante Adams, you have to make the moves to make your roster better, right? You can believe in your team. I'm not saying it's illegal to believe in your team, but at this point, Judge saying here, it can either save your picks, have guys for multiple years and hope they develop into impact players, or you trade your picks away for rental players and fill your roster with Djax type guys. They're trying to find a happy medium, and I think it's hard for a lot of teams to do that. Dylan saying we should have traded for Daniel Hunter. He has 9 more sacks this year. I think if we don't trade it for running back, then go for the second position. I don't think Hunter was ever getting moved. I would have loved it. I just don't think he was ever getting moved. I think a running back or edge or corner should have been an option, but it just, I don't know. It wasn't. I don't have any information on why it wasn't, but it wasn't. Nine Zoo saying late season Melvin Gordon equals more fumbles when the game's on the line. I mean, yes, I don't feel confident in Melvin Gordon if it came down to that. Even if it wasn't Aaron Jones or a Miles Sanders or a Zach Moss or another player that Dalvin Cook doesn't move a needle for me, but even a Dalvin Cook, let's say, that would have been a move that I would have been okay with personally. So Ravens stand pat at the deadline. I think for me, not the way I would have done it, but it's the way that it turned out for him. We'll continue talking about this tomorrow on Locked On Ravens moving forward, and we'll see what this team does. 6-2 atop the AFC overall. I appreciate all the support. Be sure to, again, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow along in audio form anywhere you get your podcast. And be sure to subscribe on Subtext, too, for more inside news there and inside text conversations as well. That's all I have for you here today, though, on this live edition of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be talking more about the Ravens trade deadline and what they should have done and what they ended up doing. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.